this evening, discussing vaccination. Before we go, thank you, Rita from Sabo. Thank you for joining us. So before we start today's topic, I would first of all like to discuss what our topic for the last training, where we discussed biosecurity. Can you hear me? I would like to get a confirmation. If you can hear me, kindly say yes in the comment section. I would like to know that you can hear me clearly. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that confirmation. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Nice. So our last training, we discussed biosecurity, which is an essential part of poultry farming, like we all know. So I will give us a rundown, like a recap of what we discussed. We discussed the definition of biosecurity. Most times farmers do not really understand what biosecurity means. So biosecurity simply means all the things that you need to do, you need to be doing as a farmer to stop the introduction and also the spread of disease in your farm. Two keywords there: one, introduction; two, the spread. So biosecurity means all the measures, all the protocols, all the things that you need to be doing as a farmer to stop the introduction of diseases and the spread of diseases in your farm. We also have different types of biosecurity. We have conceptual, we have structural, and we have operational. Conceptual is the type of biosecurity that you actually use or you focus on when you want to start poultry farm, which means it tells you where you're supposed to site your farm, it tells you where you're supposed to build your cage, it tells you where you're supposed to actually site your pen, because there are some certain factors you need to look at. One, you don't site your farm or your pen, or you don't place your cage close to a crowded environment. You also try to avoid placing your cage or you are siting your farm sorry, Michael Catherine, you're supposed to join in your audio. When you join the meeting, you're supposed to click on the audio so that you can join in your audio. That's how you can be able to hear me. All right. So conceptual biosecurity, like I was mentioning, is the one that tells you, that teaches you how you can site your farm. So you're not supposed to site your farm close to a crowded area. You're not supposed to raising your beds close to places that are very prone to erosion, where water passes all the time. And also, so those are some of the things that you look at in conceptual biosecurity. Structural biosecurity is the structures. When you are building your pen, when you are building your cage, what are the things you need to include in regards to biosecurity? We all know a food heap is an essential part of biosecurity. So when you have a pen, you're supposed to actually have a food deep right in front. So part of those are part of the structures you need to look at in regards to biosecurity when you are building your pen. Also, operational biosecurity, which is the most important aspect, and this part is the one that deals with our day-to-day activities. And this part is also very important because people that are managing the birds are the ones that are actually supposed to maintain this operational biosecurity, because it entails the things that we do daily, the things that we actually, all the activities that we do in our farm every day. So, and that entails you washing your hands, you wearing the proper clothing, you ensuring that you don't mix small birds with big birds, you ensuring that you disinfect your shoes, you disinfect all the equipment before taking them inside your pen. So that is briefly what operational biosecurity is about. You also try to limit people that go into your farm. Now, we also talked about sources of infection, because like we all know, most times if you want to bring in a new batch, you can't see my slide. Okay, let me share my slide again. So sorry about that. Please, can you see my slide now? All right, thank you so much for that confirmation. Yes. So we also talked about sources of infection. Like I mentioned, if you want to bring in a new batch of birds, we usually disinfect our pen, we disinfect all our feeders and drinkers. But in the long run, you discover that after 2 weeks, sometimes after a week or 3 weeks, your birds come down with 1 or 2 infections, and you start wondering, how did this problem get to my birds? So there are some certain areas, there's some certain things that we do that actually introduce disease to our birds. So, and that is why when I mentioned the definition of biosecurity, I mentioned 2 keywords. I said the things that you need to do to stop the introduction, to stop the bringing in of disease, and also the things that you need to do to stop the spread of disease in your farm. So these are some of the sources of infection. You can see there's a vehicle here. We have a bird, which are wild birds. Sometimes some people build their pen in such a way that the netting is not done properly. So if you have a net that is open, you're putting your birds at risk, because all these birds that fly around can easily enter, because they will be attracted by the feed that is inside the pen, and they will enter and be sharing that feed with your birds, and you will discover that they are carriers.
All right, please, if you please kindly comment where you are watching us from while Dr. Isa is trying to fix his sound. Okay, so we can hear you now.
Okay, so sorry about that. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, thank you. So, like I was saying, so sometimes farmers raise their beds in a place whereby they are mixing with many other animals. Let me give you an example. Um, I've seen a farm where the farmer was keeping his beds with goats, with turkey, with dogs, so many animals in the same area. And this is a very huge problem, because some of these animals can actually transmit diseases to your broiler birds, because some of them are reservoirs of some of these diseases. Let me give you a typical clarity on that. There are some certain infectious agents that can live in the body of one animal without showing symptoms, but then when it goes into the body of another animal, it will definitely show symptoms, and that animal will come down with a disease. You can have goats that are carrying a certain infectious agent, and you can't see my screen. Oh, okay, let me share again. So, a goat might harbor a certain infectious agent, and it might not show symptoms. But when that infectious agent actually goes into the body of a chicken, that chicken will come down with the disease. So that is why you should be very, very cautious. You should be very careful by not mixing other animals with your chickens. You don't keep your birds while you are also mixing them with other animals. Also, your poultry equipment, I've talked about this many times, saying that sometimes when we go to buy our drugs, we take these drug sachets, these drug bottles inside the pen, which is a very wrong practice. If you want to give medication, make sure you mix your drugs outside before uh, okay, maybe let me try to be a little bit slow. So when you buy these drugs, make sure that you don't take these drug bottles, these drug sachets inside the pen. The reason is because these places are some high risk areas where diseases are actually harboring themselves in those places. Places that you buy drugs, places that you buy feed. So when you come back with these drugs and feed and feed, make sure that you keep them outside. So if you want to give medications, mix your medication outside the pen before you bring it in. Because I've seen many times where you go to a farm, you see drug sachets inside the pen. After using them, they even throw the sachet away. You can go and buy an anticoccidial drug to treat coccidiosis, which is not a debilitating, it's not a serious problem. But from there, that drug sachet, that anticoccidial drug might be carrying a viral problem, might be carrying a virus that you bring and introduce to your birds, and it will cause more harm than good. So these are some of the sources of infections. People also, that is why we've talked about you limiting traffic, ensuring that you don't allow so many people come into your farm. You ensure that people that also help you take care of your bird, and if you're taking care of your birds yourself, you make sure that you always use hand gloves, or before and after you take care of your birds, you make sure that you wash your hands with soap and water before you actually go into your pen. What is the importance of biosecurity? Now, this is something that you need to listen to very carefully. This is why you should take biosecurity very seriously. First reason is it helps you complement vaccination, because we all know that we only vaccinate against two diseases, which is Newcastle using Lasota and then Gumboro using Gumboro vaccines. But there are many other diseases that can affect chickens that we don't vaccinate against. Salmonellosis is there, coccidiosis is there, infectious coryza is there, so many of them that for broiler poultry farmers, we don't usually vaccinate against. So if you vaccinate against Gumboro and against Lasota and your biosecurity is poor, you have not, you've done well for vaccinating against those two, but you will discover that your birds can still come down with coccidiosis, they can still come down with salmonella infection. So it helps you complement biosecurity by ensuring that your birds are actually healthy at all times. It also helps you reduce cost. Let me tell you one thing. If you have a very poor biosecurity, you discover that the infection pressure within your birds is very high. What do I mean by infection pressure? Infection pressure means at a particular point in time, if you take the blood sample of your chicken, we're going to see so many microorganisms, disease-causing microorganisms in their system. We might see coccidia if you take their fecal sample. We might see coccidia. If you take their blood sample, we might see salmonella. We might see infectious coryza agent. We might see so many at the same time. Then you discover that their immune system becomes weak and they are always falling sick. If they are always falling sick, you discover that you spend a lot of money buying drugs. So if you budgeted 10,000 to buy drugs, you end up spending 40,000, and that enters your cost of production. But if you had maintained a very good proper biosecurity, you discover that you spend less, you don't have to start treating all the time. Also, it helps you to avoid losses, because if your birds are always sick, you discover that every day, one or two would die. Every day, one or two would die. You stocked 50 birds, and at the end of the day, you're only taking out 30 or 35. 15 of them are dead, or 20 of them are actually dead. And that goes into a whole huge loss for you as a farmer, because that cannot be recovered. Also, it helps you improve the quality of the product, which means if you have good birds, your birds, you maintain good biosecurity, means you experience lesser cases of disease outbreak. And if you experience lesser cases of disease outbreak, you discover that your birds will grow well, they will also grow faster. So which means they will gain weight faster and they will gain weight better. Also, you discover that they don't have any form of injury or any form of swelling or any form of deformity when at the end of the production cycle. So imagine if we come to buy your birds and we discover some of them have broken legs, some of them have their eyes are blind, or maybe their muscles are shrunken. So you know that actually affects the quality of your product, because if you have a bird that has not grown well, you discover that the rate at which you sell that bird will be lower than the rate at which you sell a bird that's actually grow very well. So also, some of the measures you need to take in biosecurity is to ensure that you have a separate shoes for your pen. So whenever you want to go inside your pen, you have a separate shoe. This shoe, you don't use it for any other thing. You don't use it for bathing, you don't use it or going around. You use it only for the purpose of raising your chickens. You also try to limit access. You control traffic. You don't allow people go to your farm all the time. You also use disinfectant appropriately in your food bath, also in disinfecting uh, your surroundings as well. Also, you inculcate the habit of quarantine and isolation. This is the second aspect when I was describing biosecurity, when I told you that it helps you stop the introduction of diseases. Also, it helps you to limit the spread of diseases. Because sometimes we've sent you, there was a message we sent out about observation for our farmers, that every single day, make sure you look for a corner of your pen and try to observe your birds very well. What that will do for you is that it will help you to be able to look at your birds properly and observe their status at that point in time. Because if a bird is sick, there are some certain signs you are going to see. You discover that that bird is actually isolating itself, which means it is not very active. It means there could be a problem. You could also check their feces, the color of their feces, whether it is greenish, whether it is reddish, whether it is yellowish. You could also see from the feeding pattern, you discover that a particular bird is not actually feeding properly. That will also give you an insight. So when you see some of these signs, you quickly separate that bird, because if that bird is the source of that problem, if you separate that bird, you discover that the spread of that problem would be limited. So it is very important to be very observant, so that when you see any of those signs, try to make sure you separate the weak and the sick from the remaining flock. So thank you so much for, okay. So today we'll be discussing vaccination. And vaccination is an essential aspect of poultry farming. Can you all see my screen? Please, can you, I need a response to this. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can
Hello, can
see
you
your
see my
screen.
screen? Thank you very
We
much.
can.
Okay, thank you. So today we'll be discussing vaccination. Many times I've had interactions with some farmers, and their response based on vaccination is not very encouraging. Some people will say, oh, we don't vaccinate because I use virusin. I don't vaccinate because I use hypo. I don't vaccinate because I use antibiotic. I don't vaccinate because I do this. That is a very, very risky thing to do, because there is no replacement for vaccination. It's either you do it or you don't. If you do it, it means you have protected your birds against those diseases. And why do we do vaccination? We do vaccination because those two diseases, one, are very, very endemic. What do I mean by they are endemic? It means they are very, very common in our environment. And we all know that for broiler farmers, we do two vaccinations. We do Lasota and we also do Gumboro. And the reason why it is very, very essential for you to do vaccination is because, one, those two diseases, Newcastle and infectious bursar disease, which is also known as Gumboro, those two diseases does not have a cure, which means when your birds come down with any of those two diseases, you cannot cure it. You can only manage it. That's one. Another reason is that those two diseases have a very high mortality rate. So when they come, they can be very, very debilitating. They can be very, very, they have a very high economic importance, which means if you have 100 birds and they are ravished by Newcastle or Gumboro, 80 of them can die, or even the entire 100 can die. So you can see that could actually shut down your business entirely. So that is one of the reasons why it is very critical for you not to joke with vaccination. It is very critical for you to ensure that you vaccinate your birds against those two diseases. So they do not have a cure. They have high mortality and they spread very fast and very easily, which means if your birds are infected with Gumboro, within 5 days, you can see that the disease spreads very fast. In the first day, maybe you can see symptoms with just 2 or 3 birds, but within 2-3 days, you discover that it has a very high morbidity. The disease spread very fast, and almost all the birds will start showing symptoms. of that problem. It is very essential, it's very critical and important that we try to do this vaccination as scheduled, because there's a schedule for vaccination, which is part of the things we're going to discuss today. So, and the examples, like I mentioned, we have Lasota and we also have Bumboro. And I've also talked to you about the importance of proper vaccination, why you should take it very, very seriously. So now, there's a schedule for vaccination. For broiler farmers, we know that we do 2 vaccinations. We do Lasota and we do Bumboro. So when your birds are at day 7, your birds are due for Gumboro vaccine at that time. So I'm reading out the schedule now. It is very important. If you have a pen, you can write this down. Day 7, you do Gumboro. Day 14, you do Lasota. Day 21, you do your second Gumboro. And day 28, you do your second Lasota. That is a very good schedule for you to hold on to. Makes it easy for you. Week 1, Gumboro. Week 2, Lasota. Week 3, second Gumboro. Week 4, second Lasota. So that is a very simple and fantastic schedule for you to hold on to. So it is essential that you do vaccination 4 times if anytime you stock your bird. So this is something that I also like to discuss, because many times I've seen farmers say, oh, I did the first Lasota, I did the first Gumboro, but I didn't do the second one. And most times farmers like this used to have problems at week 4 or week 5 of their cycle. Then you discover that the immunity that that was offered in the first or second vaccine, in the first vaccination, has started wearing away, and then the birds will now start coming down with either Lasota, either Newcastle or Gumboro disease at week 5. And then they will tell you that, oh, doctor, I actually vaccinated my birds, but you vaccinated only the first dose. I am supposed to actually do the first and the second doses of these vaccinations, which means you're supposed to do 2 Gumboro and 2 Lasota vaccinations. So administration of vaccination, how do you give this vaccination? What are the precautions you need to look at? How do you actually, because there's what we call vaccine failure. Sometimes if you give this vaccination, it could fail, which means if you do not follow the proper precautions, because these vaccines are live vaccines. What do I mean by live? It means it is the virus itself that has been prepared for you to give to your bird so that it can create a certain immune response, so that their immune system will be able to recognize this virus and then create antibodies against this virus, so that when this virus tries to penetrate or go into their body as an infectious agent at that time, which means at that time it is trying to cause disease, the immune system will be able to recognize it, and it will be able to now produce enough antibodies to be able to fight it and then protect your birds against this disease. So, but if you do not give this virus appropriately, which means if you do not follow the necessary precautions, you will be introducing this virus to them wrongly, and then it might cause the disease itself. Instead of you giving it to them to protect them, you are giving it to them to actually harm them. So that is why you need to listen carefully for some of these precautions, so that you can be able to know how you give your vaccines appropriately. Number 1 precaution is that make sure you buy your vaccine from a reliable source. A reliable source is a place where you know that they are preserving their vaccines appropriately, which means they have 24 hours supply of power. Their refrigerators where they store their vaccines are working 24/7, which means there's no point in time when they will say, oh, NEPA has taken light, so we'll leave the fridge like that. Or we don't have any source of power, so we'll just keep them. Anytime we get source of power, we'll continue preserving it. So it doesn't work like that. So vaccines need to be preserved in a cold environment until the time you're going to use them. So it is very important that you buy your vaccines from a very reliable source. So that is 1. Number 2 is when you buy these vaccines, most times I do advise farmers that you get this small food flask. So when you're going, you make sure that these vendors, these shops, these vet stores where you're buying your vaccines, you make sure that they give it to you with ice blocks, and not just ice block. They should give you enough ice block that can take you to where you're going to, because if you where your location is actually far from where you're buying the vaccine, make sure you get enough ice block that will not completely melt at the time you get to your farm. I've seen many times where farmers will say, oh, when they went to buy their vaccine, they gave it to them in cold water. Please do not accept that. If you go and buy your vaccines, do not accept vaccines inside cold water. Accept your vaccines inside ice block, and it should be wrapped properly. Then you can put it in this your food flask, in this your small cooler, where you can be able to maintain the coldness till the time you're going to get to your farm and use this vaccine. So when you buy your vaccine, make sure that they give it to you inside with ice block, enough ice block that will be able to last you up to the time you get to your farm and use this vaccine. Number 3 precaution is do not expose your vaccines to sunlight. Vaccines do not like sunlight, because if you expose it to sunlight, it can inactivate the vaccine, the virus, the live virus that is inside. So that's why I do always advise that you get a small cooler, so that when you put it inside, it is not exposed to sunlight, and you're not going to remove it until you get to your farm and you're ready to use the vaccine. So it is very, very important that you maintain that cold chain up till the time you are going to actually get to your farm to use the vaccine. We also know that you're supposed to withdraw water before vaccination. I've heard many times where farmers will say, because I always do ask that, oh, for how long do you actually withdraw water? Some will say 5 hours, some will say 30 minutes, some will say 40 minutes, which is very wrong. So you're supposed to actually withdraw water for 2 hours. So if you withdraw water for 2 hours, which means by the time you remove the drinkers, you time 2 hours. So as at the time your time tells you it's been 2 hours, you can be able to now introduce the vaccine to them to start drinking. So when you want to vaccinate, you remove your drinkers, which means you have started serving them water, and then you wash your drinkers with ordinary water. It is very important to also note this precaution that you do not wash your drinkers with any detergent, any soap, or any disinfectant. You're supposed to wash your drinkers with ordinary water. The reason is that if you wash your drinkers with a disinfectant or a detergent, the residue of that disinfectant or detergent might still be on the body of that drinker. And then when you try to vaccinate, it might actually affect the efficacy of a vaccine, because it might start interfering with the live virus that you're actually introducing as vaccine to your pet. So when you're washing your drinkers, ensure you wash your drinkers with ordinary water. So like I also mentioned, you're supposed to withdraw water for 2 hours. And then once you have all this, the time to now mix your vaccine, you've withdrawn water, you have washed your drinkers, then you're supposed to actually mix your vaccine. First of all, when you have your water prepared, we always do advise that you use milk. And the type of milk you're supposed to use is called skimmed milk. It's this type of milk that has 0.1% fat. So not just any milk, because there's what we call full cream milk that has high fat volume. So we don't use that kind of milk. We use skimmed milk because it has 0.1% fat. Because milks that has high fat content, you discover that they don't dissolve properly in water. So, but when you use skimmed milk that has 0.1% fat, you discover that immediately you pour it in water, it dissolves very fast. And the essence of using skimmed milk for vaccination is that it helps you to chelate some certain impurities that might be inside that water that you will not be able to see with your naked eyes, because water samples are different based on different areas, based on different locations. If you sample water from Kaduna and you sample water from Lagos, you discover that when you take it to the lab, the constituent of those water samples might be different. Some might have high calcium, some might have high magnesium, and different other things that you see. So it is very important that you use skimmed milk, because it will help you to give better stability for your vaccine. So any impurities that might be inside that water that you are not seeing, it will help you to actually hold it so that it doesn't affect your vaccine. What type of water are you also supposed to use? It is very important to note that you should use water that has that does not have any chemical. So it is better you use well water or borehole water. So it is not good to use government tap water because in places like Kano or Kaduna and some other areas where they have access to water from the government water boards, those water type of water has been treated with some certain chemicals and it can inactivate your vaccine. You should also not use pure water. You should also not use bottled water because all of this has been treated with some certain types of chemical that will inactivate your vaccine. But if you use clean well water, that is directly from the ground and it has not been treated with anything. The same thing with borehole also. So those type are very suitable for you to use. And like I mentioned, it's also very important to use skimmed milk because it will help you to actually capture any impurities that might be inside the water. So another precaution is once you have your water and you also have mixed your skimmed milk inside this water, if you want to open your vaccine, if you can see from my slide, there's a vaccine bottle here. So this cover you are seeing here, this orange colored cover is a metal. And this metal, so first thing you do is you remove this metal. After removing this metal that you're seeing, there's another, if you can see under here, you can see like a dark coloration, which means there's like a rubber, something like a plastic thing that is pressing and covering the vaccine after you remove this metal. Now, first thing is you remove this metal. After removing this metal, before you remove that second covering, which is this one, most times you see that it is darker in color. Before you remove that second covering, you make sure that you pick this bottle, this vial of vaccine, you dip your hand inside that water that you have already prepared. Now, lest I forget, after putting this skimmed milk and mixing it in water, you have to allow the water stand for between 15 to 20 minutes, which means you allow the milk mix properly and you allow the milk also carry out what it's supposed to carry out inside the water, which means it's supposed to have, you have to give it time to actually kill it or capture all those impurities before you now introduce your vaccine. So after putting your skimmed milk, you allow the water to stand for 15 to 20 minutes before you now come and do this part of mixing the vaccine. So when you remove, like I mentioned, when you remove this metal here, before you remove the second covering, you pick and hold this bottle with your two hands, and then you dip your hand inside the water with the bottle. So you're supposed to open the vaccine under water, inside water. So immediately you remove the second covering, you're seeing, since your hand is underwater and the vaccine bottle is also underwater, water will definitely enter inside this bottle. Then you use your thumb to now block the bottle. After you have removed the second covering, which is this rubber, and then water has entered inside. So once water enters inside gently, you don't shake. You turn it gently so that the vaccine, the vaccine is in powdered form. So you allow it mix properly by turning it gently like this. You don't shake, like I mentioned. So once it has mixed properly, then you turn the water that you have inside this bottle that has already mixed with the powdered vaccine. Then you turn it inside the main water that you have already prepared in your bucket or in your plastic containers. So once you have that and you have already poured this water, then you mix the main water properly so that the vaccine will mix properly inside this water that you have already prepared. So after mixing it properly, then you share it inside your drinkers, and then you make sure that you introduce it to your birds after that time that I told you, the withdrawal period of 2 hours. Now, it is also very important to note that if you have extra drinkers, you can add extra drinkers so that your birds will have very good access to this
Okay, it looks like the network has interrupted the presentation. So kindly prepare your questions for getting close to the question period. I know this is a lot, and it might be hard for some of us to assimilate a lot of information. So if you have like a pen and paper or in the comment section, you can start dropping your questions, you know, until we have our presenter in the training again. Welcome everybody. I can see Aditayo, Ruth, Eseni, Ibrahim, Dorcas, Bernard, Mary, a lot of people. Thank you so much for joining this training. Really, really appreciate it. Looks like we have a lot of Kaduna farmers here. Anybody from any other state, please comment your location so we know we have a full house. If this is your first time joining our training, you can say first time. Just comment first time if it's your first time joining us for this training so we can know those who are new. So Lagos is here, beautiful. Ibitoye, good to have you. From Yola, wow. Sinach, welcome on board. We have Lagos farmers here, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so we have Dr. Isa back on the call. He's going to start his presentation shortly. Abdulaziz, good to have you here for the first time. Oh, all right, so welcome on board, sir.
Thank you so much. Sincere apologies for that. My network went off a bit. Okay.
All right. Thank
you. Okay, so thank you. Okay, I'll respond to all of your questions. Just kindly hold on. Let's get to the end of. So can you all hear me? Please, I need a response. Can you hear me? Okay, great, nice, thank you. Thirsty, by the time you introduce this water to them, you discover that there will be too much competition to drink the water because they are too thirsty. And in fact, if you do this when your birds are quite big, maybe at 3 weeks, you discover that they might even push away the water and the water will pour away and they will not even be able to drink this water. So, and when they push this water, since it's a live vaccine, the virus is still active in this water, and you discover that it might just sink down your bedding, and you discover that the virus will continue to live under, and then after a couple of days, it might just infect your beds, and then that becomes a problem, and then that makes your vaccination ineffective. Okay, so sorry about that. I'm really having, I don't know, I think it's almost everywhere. MTN network has been very, very terrible today. So sorry about that. Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me? I need to know you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that response. So if you don't, that is the effect of withdrawing water for too long. So it brings about overstarvation, and then that is the negative effect. So if you now do not withdraw water for as long as necessary, which means probably you only remove the water for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, you discover that by the time you give them this vaccine in water, only few of them will drink, and they will not even drink the required quantity that would be able to give them that immunity that we want. So, and then, when you introduce this water to them, there's a time lag, because it is expected that these birds drink this water within 45 minutes and if removed and changed. So if you do not withdraw water adequately, probably for 30 or 45 minutes, you discover that water will be there for 3 hours and they won't finish it. And they won't drink even the required quantity. And you discover that the vaccination that you think you've done, you have not done anything, or you have done what we call partial vaccination, and it might fail and also give you similar challenges with the other one. So that is one of the things you also need to be very cautious about. So another thing is, so after introducing this water to them, okay, you've looked at all the necessary precautions, you've followed, you've mixed this vaccine, you dipped your hand under water, you opened, you mixed properly, you've introduced the water to them, you make sure that every single bird in that pen or in that cage drinks from that water. So most times I advise farmers that once you give them this water, you try to go by the wall. If you have a pen, you go by the wall and walk around the wall, because most times you discover that birds actually stay by the wall. So as you're walking around the walls, you discover that you're pushing those ones that are actually staying by the wall inside, and they'll come in and actually drink from this water. So you try to monitor properly, you ensure that all the birds that are actually in the pen or in the cage drink from this water, so that they can also benefit from the immunity. So after that, you give them ordinary water. Probably if you vaccinated your birds in the morning, later in the evening, you can now give them you give them multivitamin for 2 days. So if you vaccinate your birds in the morning, immediately you remove the vaccine, you give them ordinary water, then later on you start giving them multivitamin. It is also very important to note that we have to be very cautious. Sometimes we have some multivitamins that are mixed with antibiotics. So when you do vaccination, you don't give them that kind of medication. You give them ordinary multivitamin. You check and be sure that you are giving them ordinary multivitamin that is not mixed with antibiotic. So that is the post-vaccination, which means after vaccination, that is what you're supposed to do. You first give them ordinary water, and subsequently you give them multivitamin for 2 days. Now, this is how you do your vaccination for both Gumboro and also for Lasota. So those are the precautions, those are the things, those are the necessary things we need to look at before we do vaccination. And just to have a recap of what we've discussed today, we've talked about why we should vaccinate, the importance of vaccination, which I told you that the 2 diseases we are vaccinating against are very endemic in our environment. So that is one of the reasons why we need to vaccinate, because they are almost everywhere. Endemic means the diseases are everywhere. So, so it is very important that you actually vaccinate your pets. Also, another reason is the 2 diseases we're vaccinating against has a very high mortality rate. It also spread very fast because they're a viral disease. And also, you discover that it does not have a cure. You can only manage. But even if you have a batch of birds that come down with Newcastle disease, even if you're able to manage it, probably out of 100, you only lost 20 or 30. The remaining 70 that are remaining are still carrying that virus in their system, and they will continuously pass it in their feces, which means you still have that virus in your farm, even though the birds have recovered. So you have to be very cautious. So for people that keep different batches of birds, maybe you have a particular batch that are 4 weeks. They came down with Newcastle, you treated, you're able to manage, and then the birds recovered. If you have another batch that are 2 weeks, you have to be very, very careful, because those ones that recovered are still passing that virus in all their fluids and also in their feces. So that means inside that pen, the virus is still live and active. Also, it is very important to also note that when you have any case, any disease outbreak, for example, Gumboro or Newcastle, after you remove that batch of birds, make sure you do a very, very proper disinfection, which means you have to dispose that litter carefully, because that virus is live in that, is still active in that litter. You also have to wash and disinfect your all the tools and equipment you use, all the feeders, all the drinkers, everything, the weighing scale, everything. You have to disinfect it appropriately before you bring in the next batch. And you have to do a very, very serious disinfection. You have to wash and disinfect your pen at least 3 times before you bring in another batch. Now, the main reason why we're here is to discuss vaccination. If you do your vaccination appropriately, you can be rest assured that you will not have outbreak of any of those 2 diseases that we actually vaccinate against. So it is very critical that you actually do your vaccination, because I've heard many times some people will say, I don't vaccinate, I always use Vaccine. Vaccine is not a replacement for vaccination. Antibiotic is not a replacement for vaccination. Herbs, whether ganyen gwanda or ganyen, any herbs that you know that are out there that you use is not a replacement for vaccination, because no. Okay, so sorry. Please, I need confirmation that you can hear me.
Loud and clear, sir.
Thank you so much for that. So now we can go into the question and answer session. Okay, can you hear me now? So, okay. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can. Okay, so I don't know. Please do not unmute yourself until I call you. Titilayo Ayodele, please kindly mute your mic. So let's take Celestina. Celestina, please go ahead and ask your question. Celestina, are you there? Okay, let's take Mary. Mary, is it Mary or Kwaei? Please go ahead, Mary. Let's kindly ask your questions. So if I call you, you can just unmute your mic, then you ask your question. Okay, maybe Mary is not here. Let's take Eshen Bola. Please, can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you,
These
sir.
people
Please,
have
if
their
you
hands up and I'm calling them and they are not responding. Okay, Dorcas, please go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Hello.
Okay, good evening, Dorcas. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. My first question
Thank you,
is
Dorcas.
it okay? Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Dorcas, I can hear you.
Is it okay to administer a vaccine when your birds are not completely okay? Because I used to have an issue with my neighbor. She would say if their poo is red or white, it's not good to give them vaccine.
Yes,
Secondly,
that's very okay.
secondly, someone we're used to washing our drinkers with disinfectant immediately after administering the vaccine. Are we supposed to can we use normal water, or it's compulsory for us to use disinfectant after administering the vaccine before giving them
Okay,
normal water?
okay. So thank you, Dorcas, for the question. So let me start from the last question. Please do not use disinfectant. You know, I mentioned before and after, because that disinfectant might have a residue. Disinfectant might has antiviral properties. It kills virus. So if the residue of that disinfectant is still on that drinker and you give it to them and they drink it, it would actually start inactivating the virus that you have actually given them to initiate that immune response that you are expecting. So please do not use disinfectant. And then your first question, please do not vaccinate birds that are sick. You're not supposed to vaccinate your birds when they are sick. It is part of the precautions. I think I actually missed that. So you're not supposed to vaccinate birds that are sick. You're supposed to vaccinate birds that are healthy. The reason why you should not do that is because when your birds are sick, at that point in time, their immune system is actually busy fighting that infection. And then they might not be able, when you vaccinate your birds, the immune system might not be able to give an adequate immune response to that vaccination. So it is Michael, please kindly mute your mic. So that is why you should not vaccinate your birds when they are sick, because when they are sick, the immune system is actually very low, and then you discover that the immune response will not be adequate for vaccination. Michael, please mute your mic. So thank you, doctors, for that question. Let's take Adetayo. Adetayo, please, you can ask your question. Okay, Ibrahim, please, you can ask your question.
So, good evening. Good evening,
Ibrahim. Thank you. Please,
where
are you joining us from?
I have two questions from Nasarawa State, Lafia, Nasarawa
Okay,
State.
thank you.
My question is on two aspects. One is the issue of when you are administering vaccine, when withdrawing water, does it include feeding? Are we withdrawing the feed or only the water? That's one. The second one, the quantity. You didn't give us the sample of number of beds and that we're supposed to use, either the vaccine, the quantity of the beds and the water, the liters of water that we're supposed to use in relation to the number of beds. So please, can you share more light on it?
Okay, so thank you for that question. So for the first question is, you are only supposed to withdraw water, not feed. So when you withdraw water, you give them feed. So you can give them feed at that time. So let me share with you. So I'm just going to talk about, maybe tell you a couple of, because we have different number of birds and different vaccination doses and at different ages. So the best way to quantify the water you're supposed to use for vaccination is you evaluate the water they drink per day. When you evaluate the water they are drinking per day, you divide it into 4. So you use the quarter of that quantity for vaccination, because the chart is a whole lot, which means the chart for there's a chart, there's quantity of water required for 100 beds at 7 days, which is 1 week. The quantity of water required for the same 100 beds at 2 weeks is different. At 3 weeks is different. At 4 weeks is different. And also for 200 beds, for 300 beds, for 400 beds. You understand? So it's the quantities are actually different, because the quantity of water birds drink at week 1 is different. You cannot compare the water they drink at week 1 and the water they drink at week 2 or week 3. At that point, the water drinking capacity has increased, and you cannot use the same quantity of water. So for 100 beds at week 1, you can use between 2 to 3 liters of water. But at week 2, you can't use that because the quantity has increased. So the best way to actually evaluate that is for you to quantify their day. For example, in a day, if you are giving them, let's say, 10 liters of water. So If you divide 10 liters by 4, what you get is what you're supposed to use for vaccination at that age. If at that age they are drinking 25 liters of water in a day, you're supposed to divide it by 4. The quarter is what you're supposed to use for vaccination. So, and that is one of the essence of you tracking what you are doing. Because if you're raising birds, you're supposed to be tracking their drinking water. You're supposed to be tracking their feed. You're supposed to be tracking their feed. And if you're a Pulus farmer and you have, if you have registered on our app, I think the link will drop. Kindly register on our app. So what our app helps you do is it helps you simplify these things, which means it helps you keep track of all of these things: the feeding, the quantity of water you are giving them, the medications you are giving them, the everything. It helps you keep record, so you don't need to actually bother yourself a whole lot. So if you sign up on our app, anytime you bring a batch of birds, you're supposed to open a new batch, and you put in the details of those birds. If there are 100 birds, if there are 200 birds. So as you're inputting that record daily, it will help you keep the record of everything you're doing. So if you have that record, you'll be able to know that, okay, at this point in time, my birds are actually consuming so quantity of feed, and they're also consuming so quantity of water. So the best way to actually know the quantity of water you're supposed to use for vaccination is to use a quarter of their daily drinking water for vaccination. I hope I have answered your question, Ibrahim. Okay, and for our farmers also, there's for everyone that is in our WhatsApp group, the document has also been shared for the quantity of water, so that you can be able to also have access to it if you are unable to have this quantification that I mentioned. So the document has been shared in all of our WhatsApp groups. You'll be able to see it at what age, the quantity of birds, and the quantity of water that you're supposed to use for vaccination. If you have not joined any cluster, kindly try to join a cluster in your area, and also try to join any of our WhatsApp groups, and also follow us on all our social media platforms. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. When you follow us, you'll be able to get all of these updates from time to time, and it will help you keep abreast on the latest trend on poultry farming as well. So let's have Ganiyu. Ganiyu, please go ahead. You can ask your question. Dauda, please kindly mute your mic.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, I want to ask, when you get chicks from different hatcheries, do you use the same vaccination schedule for them, or each hatchery will give you its own vaccination recommendation?
Okay, thank you for that question. So from every hatchery you take your birds, you're actually supposed to, one, use the same type. Yes, I got your question right. Can you hear me, sir?
Hello?
Are you there, sir? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I hear you, sir.
No. Okay, yes, I was actually. Okay, so I'm trying to respond to the question. So Mr. Gani asks if you does your vaccination depends on the hatchery you buy your birds from. So it doesn't depend on that. Whether you buy from Amo or Agrited, anywhere you buy your birds from, you are supposed to give them the same 4 doses of vaccines, which is 2 Lasota and 2 Gumboro. Now, for the schedule, it only differs based on location sometimes. And you will discover that some hatcheries will give you, they have their own personal vaccination schedule. And if you look at it, you discover that it is similar with what I just told you. It might be different based on number of days. Some people will tell you that instead of doing it at day 7, do it at day 9. But the goal is that you have to do it. And where we have these differences is because of differences in location. Because some certain diseases are more endemic in certain areas than in some certain areas. There are some certain areas that Gumboro is more endemic, it is more common. And there are some certain areas that Newcastle is actually more endemic. So in areas where you have Newcastle to be more endemic, instead of starting your vaccination with Gumboro at day 7, which is week 1, you can decide to start with Lasota at week 1. So that is where you have differences in the schedule because the schedule that you might see in Akwa Ibom might be different from the schedule
sorry,
you
on that
see in
note,
Maiduguri or in Kano. Yeah.
Yeah, on that note, is it appropriate to do screening tests before you vaccinate, because you are buying from another artery which is different from?
So, okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
The one you are used to.
Kindly confirm if you can hear me.
I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. So doing a titer test, one, for smallholder farmers is not economical. Secondly, the titer test will only tell you the immune titer level, which means after vaccination, the titer test will tell you that, okay, your vaccination was done effectively. So what I was trying to say is that any schedule you actually follow, for example, if you're in Lagos and you buy birds from Agrited, and Agrited gives you their vaccination schedule, if you follow it, it's still okay. The goal is, one, try to follow the precautions, because whether you follow Agrited vaccination schedule, or you follow the one you saw on Google, or you follow the one I mentioned to you, if you do not follow those precautions that I mentioned, it will all result to nothing. So if you follow the vaccination schedule of the hatchery that you bought your birds from, it's still very, very okay. You're still going to actually achieve the same result. Having differences in some certain number of days, or maybe probably having differences in the one you're starting with, will not give you any negative effect. The negative effect it might give you is you being very proactive. If you discover, for example, that in your environment there's a constant outbreak of Newcastle, so which means immediately you have your birds, instead of doing Gumboro first, try to do Lasota first. So because in the schedule it might tell you to do Gumboro first. So that is one of the essence of you being proactive, knowing what is happening in your environment. So also, it is very important that you follow precautions appropriately, because at the end of 5 weeks, the goal is that you should have done 2 doses of Lasota and 2 doses of Gumboro. Any schedule you follow, at the end of 5 weeks, you should have done all of that. Mr. Ganiyu, I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, I heard you. But on the final note, I'm sure to do precision agriculture is to get the moment you take your dildos from the hatchery, take samples to the laboratory, let them analyze it, and then they recommend the vaccination schedule for you based on the peculiar situation of that bird right from the hatchery. Is that okay?
Yes, like I mentioned, I said for smallholder farmers, most times people that do that are big farms. But for smallholder farmers, because of the cost, they might not be able to do that. And also another limitations to that is that facilities, there are people who do not have access to sophisticated laboratories that can actually run those kind of tests. But what that test will tell you, like I mentioned, is 2 things. One, it will tell you the status of those birds, which means when you take birds from, I think I saw a question where somebody said, sometimes you take birds from hatcheries that are already having CRD, or that might already be having salmonella. So when you take these samples to the lab, you'll be able to find out if they have any running infection at that time or not, which means you'll be able to know their immune status. You'll be able to know if they have a proper immune status, which is a very good thing to do if you can afford it. One, if you also have access to the laboratories that can be able to run those kind of tests. So it's actually a good thing. But because of cost and because of those limitations, that is why sometimes farmers don't have access to those types
Thank
of
you very much.
tests. But it's actually a very good thing to do. There's also another test called titer test, which means after vaccination, you also take samples again to the lab. If you run this test, it will tell you how, based on percentage, how well your vaccination went. It will be able to tell you that, oh, your vaccination was very, very okay, or the immune response was very poor. So if it tells you that, it means you can revaccinate. So it gives you clarity. But like I also mentioned, cost and lack of necessary or facilities also gives us limitations to those kind of tests. Jamila Abdullahi, kindly go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Gani, for your questions. Jamila Abdullahi, kindly go ahead and ask your questions.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, it seems Jamila is not here. Let's have Michael.
Hello, yes, good evening.
All right, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm calling from Lafia, Nasarawa State. We actually administered Lasota for our 2 weeks birth. So they barely took even half of it. So we have to dispose it. Can you hear me? Hello?
He's hearing.
Yes, they barely took half of it. So my question is, can we still re-administer the Lasota again before giving them the second dose of Gombola?
Okay, kindly give our doctor some minutes. He's going to jump right in. I think the network has interrupted the call again. And, we're going to take some of the questions. Okay, please, can you mute your mic?
Okay, sir. Please, can you just excuse others so that we're able to hear? You'll be talking to your brother or your children. Just please shift a little.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
All right. Sorry, Michael Katrin, kindly go ahead. So sorry about that. My network went off a
Yes,
bit.
I'm calling from Lafia, Nasarawa State. So our
Oh,
2
thank
weeks
you so
birth,
much.
we administered Lasota for them as at last week's Friday. So they didn't even take
Okay.
half of it. We have to dispose it. So right now, I don't know. This week Friday is supposed to make it the third week that they are supposed to take Gombola. So now are we still going to re-administer Lasota for them in place of the second dose of Gombola?
Okay. So
Yes.
there are two things that could have happened. Either you used you didn't quantify the water you're supposed to use for vaccination adequately, like I mentioned the other time. That was why they didn't drink the water as much as expected. So just go ahead with the schedule since you are giving them the first dose. So the only thing you need to do is you need to correct that mistake. I think we shared the quantity, the document that tells you the quantity of water you're supposed to use. I also mentioned that you can also quantify by, if you know the quantity, if you are quantifying the quantity of water they are actually taking per day, you give them a quarter of that for vaccination and ensure that you withdraw water for at least 2 hours before vaccination. So if the vaccination that they are due for, go ahead and do it, which is Gumboro, then
Okay.
by the time they are at week 4, they will be due for another Lasota. So try and make sure you do that Lasota appropriately. If you have any challenges, kindly drop it in your cluster WhatsApp group so that our extension officers would respond to you appropriately and tell you what to do in this regards. I think you all know that we have qualified extension officers who are seasoned poultry experts that actually respond to your questions and requests anytime you have challenges. So kindly observe and then continue with your vaccination schedule. Thank you.
All right.
So let's have, let's have 2 or 3 persons. Let's have Adegoke. Adegoke, kindly go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening,
Hello,
sir.
can you
Thank
hear
you
me,
for
sir?
joining us. Yes,
Okay,
loud and
good
clear,
evening, sir.
sir.
How are you doing, sir?
Fine, thank you so much. Good evening.
We really appreciate for your program. Thank you so much, very much, sir. My question goes straight to
Thank you so much,
the
sir.
point. In a case
Okay.
whereby you have 1,000 bears and
Yes.
1,000 those, now for let me use layer as a case study. You have a layer
Okay.
base, and now you are using battery cage system. Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Go ahead, sir. I can hear
Hello.
you.
Okay, you have a 1,000 bed layer, and 1,000 dose is recommended for 1,000 bed layer. And how do you want to apply the water quantity for the 1,000 layer? That's the question.
Okay, thank you, Adegoke, for the option for now. So, but I will still respond to that question. So, if you have 1,000 birds and you want to administer 1,000 doses, like I mentioned, I told you that you can simply, in a very simple way, for you to know the quantity of water you're supposed to use. If you have 1,000 layers, it means you have a supply for their water. That supply of water, you can easily know the quantity of water they're actually consuming per day. If they are consuming 500,
Dr. Isa, are you still there? We can't hear you.
okay, so sorry about that. Can you hear me? I want to know if you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So Mr. Adegoke, did you get that? Did we all get that? So that's how you get the quantity of water you're supposed to use. Mary or Pai, please go ahead. Let me just take a couple of questions. Then I'll also be checking the comment section. There are quite a number of questions there that I would need to respond to. Mary, please go ahead. So Titilayo Ayodele, you asked the liter of water you're supposed to use. I think I've mentioned that and also shared that in our WhatsApp groups. Also, Chioma also asked the same question. Yes, I think we've answered that. Okay, somebody, Adetayo Olayinka said, what is the quantity of milk you use for vaccination? That's a very good question. The quantity of milk you're supposed to use is between 1.5 to 2 grams per liter. Per liter of water, you use 1.5 to 2 grams per liter. So that's the quantity of milk you're supposed to mix in water for vaccination. And just to have a recap, I mentioned that if you put this milk, you're supposed to allow the water stand for 15 to 20 minutes before you now introduce your vaccine. Okay, Ali Ibitoye said, how best do we know how many doses to give in relation to the number of birds? So for every vial, you can see we have 100 doses, we have 1,000 doses, we have 500 doses. So When you go and buy your vaccine, you tell them the number of birds you have, and they'll give you the dose. And when they give you the vial, which means the bottle, when you look at the body, you will see that it is boldly written there, 100 doses, which means it is for 100 birds. So that's how you know the doses you're supposed to use for. So example of skimmed milk. Skimmed milk, I think there are quite a number of them. When you go to any provision store, you ask them for skimmed milk. I think Dano makes one. Mixie also makes skimmed milk. So I also have another question here. Okay, so somebody is asking if there's any effect to using creamy milk. Okay, there's no necessary effect. The only thing is it does not mix properly in water. So it is better that you use the skimmed milk because it is more appropriate for that purpose. Okay, how can we vaccinate? Okay, somebody, Eshe Ebola Emmanuel asks that how can we know vaccine has failed? So how you know vaccine has failed, there are two ways. One, either when you give this vaccine, after a couple of days, they come down with the same problem. For example, you give Lasota today, after 3-4 days, or after a week or 5 days, you now discover that your birds actually come down with Newcastle disease after you've given them the vaccine just a few days ago. You know that the vaccination has failed. The second way to also know is that after you've given your vaccine, probably you gave your last Lasota at 4 weeks, and you wanted to keep your birds for till maybe 6 weeks. Maybe after 1 week, you've given your vaccine after 1 week or after a week and some days, the bird still came down with the same problem that you vaccinated against. You know that your vaccination has actually failed. Okay, I think I've answered most of the questions. Okay, I think I've talked about vaccine failure, and I've also talked about the fact that if your birds are actually sick, you should not vaccinate them. Okay, Sinash Campbell said she didn't get what I said about using herbs and what quantity of milk do we use, do we add per dose? Like I mentioned, 1.5 to 2 grams per liter of water is the quantity of milk you're supposed to use. So what I said about herbs was that using herbs or using virusin or antibiotic is not a replacement for vaccination. Whatever you are using, you still have to do vaccination because they are two different things. Yes, Lina Salmamza said, should I add milk for both Lasota and Gumboro vaccine? Yes, for any time, for every time you're actually doing oral vaccination, which means vaccines you give in water, you're supposed to actually use the milk. Okay, somebody asked for our social media handles. I think that has been shared. Okay, Shoma says she has many questions. So kindly, you can drop all your questions in our groups, WhatsApp groups. We have the general group and the different groups for different clusters. Okay, so Mubarak Sule said, how long should it last? It should last for not more than 45 minutes, maximum of 1 hour, minimum of between 30 to 45 minutes, so that they should be able to finish drinking the water and then you give them. Okay, so somebody asked, said, I have, for instance, 120 birds. Will I throw away some? Will I throw some away if 200 doses mixed? Yes, definitely. So if you have 120 birds, you don't need to. So sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Please
hear you,
let me
sir.
know if you can hear me. Okay,
Yes.
so like I was saying, if you have 120 beds, so you can try and get 150 doses. But if you don't get, if you have the 200 doses and you mix them, you can decide to mix them in two different containers, which means mixing the 100 doses in two different spaces. Then you now take out about 80% from one of this mixture of 100 doses and pour it away. Then the remaining 20%, you add it to the 100 doses that you mix and then give it to your 120 beds. So if you have, for example, you have 95 beds, you can easily give them 100 doses and that will be fine. But if you have 120 or you have 150 and you could not get 150 doses, if you buy 100 and 200 doses, you have to actually divide the water appropriately so that you can be able to give it to the water. And when you divide the water, that one you're throwing away, please do not throw it around your environment. You can flush it down your toilet, or you can mix it with a disinfectant and flush it down the drain. Because if you pour it around your environment, you're actually spreading the virus, like I rightly mentioned. So let me say two questions. Celestina, kindly go ahead with your question. Celestina, can you hear me?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the classes. And my problem is about the dissolving the vaccine in the water. I don't know if you can help us with a video or something like that. Not too clear about it.
Okay, so let me just explain again, and then probably we'll try and make a demonstration video and share in all our groups. So when you get to the point when you want to mix your vaccine, you have already got measured the water quantity in a bowl or in a plastic container. First thing is you also put your skimmed milk, like I mentioned, and I mentioned that the dose for the skimmed milk is 1.5 to 2 grams per liter of water. So when you put that milk, you mix and you allow the water to stand for 15 to 20 minutes. Then let me share my screen again so that it will make it easy for me to explain this. So you can see, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you can see, so if you've already mixed the milk, first thing is you remove this orange color you are seeing here is a metal. So once you pull it off, there's another cover under it. You can see like there's a dark coloration here. So that cover, you don't open it. You now carry this bottle, this vaccine vial, and then you put it under water. So you use your two hands and you take this bottle and you put your hands with this bottle under that water that you've already prepared with your skimmed milk. Okay. So now, when you put your hands under this water, that is when you remove that second cover, which is the plastic, the rubber second cover. Immediately you open it and you remove it, water will rush into this bottle here. Once water rushes in, you block it with your thumb. Once you block it, then you bring it up and then you turn it gently. You don't shake. So this turning you're doing, you're trying to make sure that the powdered form of the vaccine mixes properly with the water that entered the bottle. So once you turn it gently and the water mixes, the vaccine mixes appropriately, then you now turn the water that you have inside this bottle inside the main water that you have prepared. When you turn it, then you now mix the water so that the vaccine actually mixes properly inside this water that you prepared. Then you can now administer the vaccine. I hope that's clear,
yes, sir.
Celestina.
Yes, sir.
All
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So let me have, you can drop your hand, Celestina. Let me have Everlove. Everlove, kindly go ahead. Okay, Everlove for Christ. Please, if you can hear me, you can.
Are you hearing me? So are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Network has been my challenge. Hello?
Okay.
Are you hearing me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
I said network has been my challenge. So the
Okay.
issue, the place that I'm finding difficult is the place that you said that while vaccinating, the quantity of water that we used when the birds are 1 week will be different from the ones that we are going to use when they are 2 weeks and 3 and 4 weeks. So that is where I did not
Yes.
understand.
Okay, so if you want to vaccinate, when you are vaccinating your birds at week 1, birds that are 1 week old, the water they are drinking is not as much as the water birds that are 4 weeks old are drinking. I think we can all agree with that. Birds that are 4 weeks old drink more water than birds that are 1 week old.
Very true.
Yes. So it means if you use the same quantity of water you use for vaccination when your birds are 1 week old, for the same birds that are 4 weeks old, the water will be too small. You discover that maybe in 5 minutes they will drink everything and it will be finished, and your vaccination will not be effective. So that's why I mentioned. Thank you so much. So that's why I mentioned that the quantity of water you are supposed to use for vaccination at week 1 is different from the quantity of water you're supposed to use for vaccination at week 2, week 3, and week 4. And we shared a document. There's a document I sent so that we share it for everyone to see in our WhatsApp groups. And I also said a very simple way of knowing the quantity of water you can use for your vaccination is if you quantify the quantity of water your birds are drinking per day, you can use a quarter of that water for vaccination. That is the best and the easiest way. For example, at that point in time, maybe you don't have access to this document that we shared. In a very simple term, and that is why we keep saying that it is very essential for farmers to keep proper record. You keep record of feed, you keep record of water they are drinking, you keep record of the drugs that they are taking. And I also mentioned that is why you need to sign up on our app. The link to sign up on our app is in the comment section. If you sign up and you actually put in a new batch at every point in time, this app will help you simplify in keeping some of these records. So if you have these records, you can easily know the quantity of water because you already know the quantity of water they are taking per day at that time, whether week 1 or week 2 or week 3 or week 4. So if you know the quantity of water, a quarter of that, which is when you divide it by 4, that quantity is what you should use for vaccination. Thank you so much. So I will take the last question now. Please, if you have any more questions, you can drop them in our WhatsApp group, and then I would respond to those questions because we need to round up now. I'll take okay, I'll take Diana David. If you can hear me, Madam Diana, if you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay, I think Madam Diana is not here. Let's take one more question. Bulus, can you hear me? Pull something, Bulus. If you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself and you can ask your question. Okay, let's take Robert Obono Opa. Please, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
My name is Robert from Abuja. I just want to make an like my question is why is that Polus is not in Abuja?
Okay, Royal, please can you respond to that?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, Robert. We have farmers who are in Abuja. So what you're going to do is you can join our general WhatsApp group, right? And then we'll pair you with Abuja clusters. Understand? But for now, we've not started our uptake operations in Abuja. You can always benefit from this type of training. You know, you can always ask some questions. Our doctors will respond to you. We have plans to, you know, begin our uptake operations in Abuja and other parts of Nigeria soon. So when that time comes, we'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. Can I say
Hello,
something?
good evening.
Robert, did you have any more questions?
Yes, yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, the question I want to ask, although I came in on the meeting late, what is there any disadvantage on not vaccinating birds?
Yes. Okay. I think you joined late. In fact, it's
Yeah.
not just any advantage. There's a lot of disadvantages. In fact, so we talked about importance of vaccination. We said, why do we need to vaccinate? Why is it important for us to vaccinate? And one of it is the fact that we only vaccinate against gumboro for broiler farmers. We only vaccinate against gumboro and Newcastle, which is Lasota. So you discover that those two diseases are very endemic in our environment. Endemic means they are everywhere, so they can easily actually attack your birds at any point in time. So that's one of the reasons why we vaccinate. The second reason is those diseases are very, very debilitating. If they actually come in contact, it means they have as high as 80 to 100% mortality rate, which means if you have 100 birds, they can actually kill 80 or even the entire 100. And also they have a very high morbidity rate. Morbidity rate means how fast disease spread when it comes. They spread very fast in a very short period of time. So when gumboro comes, within 5 days, you discover that the entire flock is actually down with that problem. Another thing also is that those diseases cannot be cured. It can only be managed. So when they come, you can't cure it. Even if you're able to manage it and some of them survive, they will continue to pass that virus in their feces, in their secretions. So that means the virus will still be in your farm and your environment. So after that batch of birds, you're supposed to actually do a very, very strong disinfection to be able to eliminate that virus from your environment. So that is why it is very, very important to actually vaccinate. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today from Nasarawa, from Lagos, from everywhere, from Abuja, from Kaduna, from every part of Nigeria. We really appreciate you. We promise to bring trainings like this to you from time to time. Like I also mentioned, you can follow us on all our social media platforms. You'll be able to get updates on our trainings. You also get tips on poultry farming. You will also be able to connect with us at every point in time. There's also a link to sign up on our app in the comment section. If you sign up on our app, it simplifies, helps you with your poultry farm. It helps you keep record. It helps you manage your birds properly. Most of the questions that you have, you discover that the app can actually help you answer some of them. So thank you very much for joining us today. We hope to see you next time when we come up with trainings like this. Linda Micah from Kakuri, please kindly drop your question in your group cluster, your cluster group, and I will respond to that. Bulus, I called you, but you are not here. Please kindly drop your question in your in the general group, or you can also drop it in your cluster group. Thank you so much for joining us today. See you next time. Bye.